You never really know what people are capable of until you're their target, so stay with me until the end. Because this story isn't about forgiveness. It's about revenge, and it's delicious. My name is Helena. I'm 31. I've been married to Marcos for 5 years, and for the longest time, our relationship seemed perfect. Until his mother decided I wasn't good enough. Her name is Clotilde. Sounds like a villain, and trust me, she lives up to it. When Marcos first introduced me to his family, I was nervous but hopeful. I'd heard so much about his close-knit family, how they'd welcomed his previous girlfriends. With open arms, I bought expensive wine, researched conversation topics, and even learned to make his grandmother's famous flan recipe that first dinner. Clotilde was everything I'd hoped for. She hugged me warmly, complimented my dress, and insisted I call her Mama Chloe like Marcus did. She showed me family albums, shared embarrassing childhood stories about my husband, and made me feel like I belonged. "You're so different from the others," she said, squeezing my hand. "I can tell you really love him." I left that night feeling blessed. Finally, a mother-in-law who actually liked me. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. At first, she pretended to like me, called me my sweet daughter-in-law, said I was special, told everyone how lucky Marcus was to have found me. But the moment Marcus would leave the room, her tone changed completely. "You'll never be like his ex. You know, you try so hard. But you're not really fit for this family. Marcos has always been too kind. He settles for less than he deserves." And she said it all with that same warm smile. As if we were sharing secrets between friends. The comments started small. Subtle digs about my cooking, my career, my appearance. When I'd make dinner, she'd say, "Oh, how creative." Marcus usually prefers more traditional flavors. When I mentioned a promotion at work, she'd respond with, "How nice that they're being so accommodating." Marcus insisted it was all in my head, that his mom just wanted us to be happy, that she was protective but meant well, and I really tried to believe that I did. I made excuses for her, rationalized her behavior, convinced myself that I was being too sensitive. After all, she'd raised the man I loved. She couldn't be that bad, right? When Marcus proposed, Clotilde was the first person he called. I watched his face light up as he shared our news, expecting to hear her joy through the phone. Instead, I heard a long pause followed by a measured, "Oh." How sudden. The wedding planning was its own special kind of hell. Clotilde had opinions about everything. The venue was too modern, the flowers too expensive. My dress too revealing, she suggested we postpone. Until I could lose a few pounds and look more appropriate for the photographs. But she never said these things in front of Marcos, always when he was getting drinks or in the bathroom, or taking a phone call. It was surgical in its precision. She insisted on throwing my bridal shower, promising it would be intimate and elegant. When the day came, it was indeed intimate. So intimate that half my guest list seemed to have mysteriously not received their invitations. My college friends, my work colleagues, even my own sister claimed they never got the details. "What a shame about the mail service these days," Clotilde said with that practiced smile. "At least we have quality over quantity." I should have seen it as a preview of what was coming. When we announced my pregnancy, Clotilde's reaction was complicated. In front of Marcus, she was overjoyed. Tears, hugs, immediate plans for decorating the nursery. But later, when she thought we were alone, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said, washing dishes with unnecessary force. "Babies change everything." Marcus has always been so focused on his career. "We're both excited about starting a family," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course you are. You've gotten what you wanted." The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to ask what she meant. But Marcus walked in at that moment, and her face transformed back into that of a loving grandmother-to-be throughout my pregnancy. The comments escalated. She questioned my doctor's advice, criticized my maternity clothes, and constantly reminded me of how delicate Marcus had been as a baby, implying I might not be capable of handling such a sensitive child. She'd make these observations, always with witnesses around, but phrased as concern. "I'm just worried. Helena might be pushing herself too hard. She looks so tired lately. Or I hope she's being careful with her diet. The baby needs proper nutrition." It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one small enough to dismiss, but together forming a pattern of systematic undermining. It was my first child, a huge moment. I dreamed of this day since I was little, surrounded by the women who loved me, celebrating the new life growing inside me. Clotilde kindly offered to host the party at her house. She had a beautiful backyard, she said, perfect for an outdoor celebration. She'd handle everything. I should have been suspicious. I should have insisted on co-planning, or at least staying more involved. But I was 7 months pregnant, exhausted from work, and frankly relieved to have help. I helped with decorations anyway. Spent hours choosing the perfect pastel color scheme, ordering custom cookies, selecting party favors. I made a guest list, friends from college, co-workers I'd grown close to, my cousins, my mom, my sister, old friends from my hometown. About 30 names total. Clotilde smiled and said, "I'll handle the invites, you just rest, dear." The week before the shower, I kept waiting for my friends to mention it. Surely they'd be asking about gift registries, or what I wanted them to bring, or what time to arrive, but nobody said anything. When I casually brought it up to my sister, she looked confused. What baby shower? A cold dread settled in my stomach. The one this Saturday at Clotilde's house, Helena. I never got an invitation. I called my best friend from college. She hadn't heard anything either. Neither had my work friends or my cousins, or anyone from my side when I confronted Clotilde. She looked genuinely surprised. Oh no, there must have been some mix-up with the addresses. Don't worry, dear. Marcus's family will make sure you feel celebrated. The day came. I wore a flowing floral dress that made me feel beautiful, despite my swollen ankles and constant backache. I'd spent an hour on my hair and makeup, wanting to glow for the photos I treasure forever. But when I arrived at Clotilde's house, something felt immediately off. Very off. The decorations were beautiful. She'd executed my vision perfectly. But the guests, the only people there were Marcus's relatives. His aunts, his female cousins. Family friends I'd met maybe twice. People who were perfectly nice but barely knew me. None of my friends, not even my mom. My heart dropped into my stomach. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Where is everyone else?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Clotilde, smiling as always, said, "Must have been a mix-up with the invitations. What a shame. But look how lovely everything turned out." Anyway, I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I sat on the closed toilet seat and cried silently for 10 minutes. My hands shook as I tried to fix my makeup, to prepare myself to go back out there and pretend everything was fine. But inside I shattered completely. And in that moment, sitting in that bathroom, I promised myself if she wanted a silent war, I'd answer with an explosion. Our son Gabriel was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. After 18 hours of labor, he was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and the most beautiful dark eyes I'd ever seen. Marcus cried when he held him for the first time. I fell in love all over again, watching my husband transform into a father. But even in those precious first days, Clotilde found ways to insert her criticism. She'd show up unannounced, claiming she just wanted to help, but her help came with a constant stream of commentary. She criticized how I swaddled Gabriel, how I burped him, how often I fed him. She said my breast milk looked thin and suggested I supplement with formula. She questioned whether I was sleeping enough, eating enough, doing enough to bounce back to my pre-pregnancy body. "Marcos, your mother looked just radiant. Weeks after you were born," she'd say, showing photos of herself from 30 years ago. Some women just handle motherhood more naturally. All of it said right in front of Marcos, who still thought she meant well. "You're overreacting, love. That's just how she is. She raised me. Didn't she? I turned out fine." How she is humiliating me, undermining me, excluding my entire side of the family, and calling it a mistake. That's when I started recording. At first, it was just my phone in my pocket during her visits. I'd start recording when I heard her car in the driveway, knowing that as soon as Marcus left the room, the real Clotilde would emerge. Later, when the recordings became too frequent and my phone storage too full, I installed a small hidden camera in the living room. Just a tiny thing smaller than a thumb drive, tucked behind a picture frame. The footage I captured was devastating. I caught her saying she's not fit to be a mother. "Marcos, look at her. She's falling apart. You should have married Camilla instead. You deserve so much better, son. She's draining your energy, your happiness. Even the baby can sense her anxiety." She planned this pregnancy, got herself knocked up to trap you. Now you're stuck in the absolute worst. That baby might not even be yours. She was at that office party awfully late. The night before, she told you she was pregnant. I sat alone in my bedroom, headphones on, listening to recordings of my mother-in-law calling me a cheater, a gold digger, an unfit mother. Holding my sleeping baby against my chest while she systematically tried to poison my husband, against me, and that's when my plan took shape. Our son's baptism was approaching. In our family, baptisms are huge celebrations, almost as big as weddings. I initially suggested something small, just close family and a few friends. But of course, Clotilde had opinions about everything. I mentioned using my friend Sarah's catering company. She rolled her eyes and said they were too experimental. For such a traditional event, I suggested the priest from my childhood church. She scoffed and said our son should be baptized, where his father and grandfather had been. Eventually, she offered to organize everything herself. The church, the reception hall, the catering, the decorations, the guest list, and I let her. Of course, Clotilde, plan it however you like. I trust your judgment completely. It'll be beautiful. She lit up at finally being given complete control. For weeks, she planned and coordinated, calling me daily with updates, clearly thrilled to be the center of attention. Meanwhile, I was editing footage. I spent weeks going through hours of recordings, selecting the most damning clips. I learned basic video editing software, staying up late after Gabriel went to sleep to piece together my evidence. I organized it chronologically, starting with subtle comments from early in our relationship, escalating to the recent accusations about the baby's paternity. I added subtitles to make sure every word was crystal clear even. If someone was sitting in the back of the reception hall, I included photos from the baby shower. Wide shots showing a room full of strangers. None of my people. Contrasted with photos from Marcus's cousin's shower, the year before, packed with friends and family from both sides. I showed screenshots of my guest list, then screenshots of the actual attendees. The evidence was undeniable. Then I recorded myself looking straight into the camera, with Gabriel sleeping in my arms. This is the woman who says she loves me like a daughter. This is the woman who claims to want our family's happiness. For 2 years, she has systematically tried to isolate me, undermine me, and poison my husband against me. Today you'll hear her in her own words. I saved everything to a USB drive and contacted Miguel, the guy in charge of the audiovisual setup. At the reception hall, I told him I had a surprise tribute video for the family, to be played right before the grandmother's speech. He smiled and said it sounded lovely. The baptism day arrived with perfect spring weather. Gabriel looked like an angel in his white christening gown, a family heirloom that had been worn by Marcus and his father before him. The church was full both sides of the family friends. Co-workers, Clotilde had invited everyone, wanting to show off her organization skills and basking in the attention of being the doting grandmother. She wore a pastel pink dress with pearls, looking every inch the refined matriarch. She posed for photos, accepted compliments on the beautiful ceremony, and wore that smug little smile that I'd come to know so well. The religious ceremony was beautiful. Gabriel barely cried when the holy water touched his forehead. Marcos looked proud and handsome in his navy suit. For a moment, I almost felt guilty about what was coming. Almost we moved to the reception hall for lunch. Clotilde had outdone herself. Elegant floral arrangements, a gorgeous cake, perfectly coordinated linens. She'd invited nearly 100 people, making sure everyone would witness her triumph. As the perfect grandmother and hostess, just as she stood up to give her speech, tapping her champagne glass to get everyone's attention. The projector screen lit up. Before Grandma says a few words, Miguel announced we have a short tribute to family. And the video started. The room fell completely silent. First came her voice, crystal clear through the sound system, making those nasty comments about my fitness as a mother, about trapping Marcos with a pregnancy, about the baby's paternity. Then came the images of the empty baby shower, contrasted with the full guest list I'd prepared. Then my face looking directly into the camera, with Gabriel in my arms. She erased me from my own celebration. She humiliated me in front of family. She treated me like an enemy while pretending to love me, but today in front of everyone, I choose not to stay silent anymore. The room was frozen. You could hear a pin drop. Clotilde stood like a statue, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. Marco slowly stood up, his face cycling through confusion, horror, and recognition. "Helena, is this real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Every word, and there's more if anyone wants to hear it." Clotilde set down her glass and walked out, head down, shoulders shaking, speechless. For the first time in the 2 years I'd known her. Several of Marcus's relatives followed her out, but many stayed my side of the family. The people who'd finally been invited to a celebration sat in stunned silence before slowly beginning to process what they'd just witnessed. Marcus apologized, he cried. Said he had no idea that he was blind, that he should have protected me. Did I forgive him immediately? Not yet. Trust. Once broken, takes time to rebuild. But that day, for the first time in 2 years, I finally breathe freely today. Our son is 2 years old, he's walking, talking, and has his father's mischievous smile. I don't let anyone else take control of our important moments anymore. I plan his birthday parties. I choose his playdates. I decide who gets to be involved in his life. My mom is back in our lives, making up for lost time with her grandson. My friends have forgiven the missed celebrations and awkward explanations. We host regular dinners. And my house is full of laughter again. Marcus went to therapy. He had to unlearn a lifetime of dismissing women's concerns as overreacting and recognizing manipulation disguised as love. It wasn't easy, but he did the work. And Clotilde, she hasn't tried to organize a single family event since she sends birthday cards and Christmas gifts. But she doesn't drop by unannounced. She doesn't offer unsolicited advice. She doesn't make comments about my parenting or my marriage, not because she's changed necessarily, but because she knows that if she tries again, I'll expose her all over again and worse. Next time there might not be any forgiveness at all. A year later, I got an envelope in the mail. Handwritten address, expensive stationery. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. "Helena," it began. "You may never forgive me, and I understand why I was wrong. Not just in my actions, but in my thinking. Out of fear, ego, and a desperate need to control everything around me. I tried to destroy something beautiful. I'm not just sorry for what I did to you, but for what I did to Marcos, who was raised to think this behavior was normal. I'm sorry for what I stole from Gabriel, the chance to have a grandmother who loves without conditions. You showed me the truth with more strength than I've ever had. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for fighting back. Thank you for loving my son enough to save him from repeating my mistakes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you were right, and I was wrong, and I'm grateful that someone finally had the courage to say so." It was signed simply Clotilde. I didn't reply. I'm still not sure I want to. But I kept the letter, because even snakes sometimes shed their skin. Whether what's underneath is different remains to be seen, but me. I've learned to walk with my head high. I've learned to trust my instincts. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior. And I've learned to never, ever lower my eyes for anyone. If you've ever had a mother-in-law like this, you're not alone. If you've ever felt gaslit, undermined, or systematically excluded, your feelings are valid, and if you've ever been told you're overreacting to treatment that made you feel small, know this. You have the right to stand up for yourself. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to show them, and everyone else, exactly who they really are. The truth, as they say, will set you free even if it's not pretty.